Welcome to the War Room. It is Wednesday, the year of our Lord 2020, July the 1st. And you're in the War Room with Greg Manns, Jack Posobiec, a special guest host. And Jack, thank you so much, by the way, for making the trip down here. I know that the phone call you got this morning was about 20 minutes before the show started. Hey, buddy, want you in the studio. So
I thought I was going to be Skyping in.
No.
Oh, yeah, it'd be great. And there's, no, we need you here. Oh, okay.
Look, I got an empty seat right next to me because Jack Maxey's out in the field at the moment at the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. Let me run that back for you guys. The first hour of this show today, episode 259. If you're listening on a podcast, I sincerely hope you will go and look at the pictures on the video stream, whether it's on America's Voice, whether it's on YouTube, we do Facebook Live. Go and look at the first hour of this show. Go and look at the juxtaposition between what's taking place in Hong Kong, what's taking place in the Chaz, what's taking place outside the embassy in Washington, D.C., the CCP embassy in Washington, D.C. Jack Maxey's in the field right there, right now. We're going to try and bring you live footage, but if we can't, because of any disruption that may be taking place live from the embassy there, we're going to bring you filmed footage that's being filmed and sent into America's Voice live. I believe we even may have one of those right now. Let's roll the clip.
Guys, we're here in front of the Chinese Communist Embassy where nearly 100 people are out here accusing the Chinese government of committing global murder because of the CCP virus. We've heard people chanting CCP virus, China lied, Americans died. There are also various chants through here, 4 more years for Donald Trump. These people know who their friend is in America. They know who's going to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party. Everyone, all of our listeners, I want you to support these people. The courage is so inspiring. And the risks that they're taking, as you've been talking about with Jack Posobiec and with Raheem and with Bannon, the risks that they are taking are ones that we cannot imagine. So they need our moral support, they need our prayers, and they need us in the streets behind them. We're signing out now. Back to you, Raheem.
Well, that's great. Thanks for the report, Jack Maxey in the field right there. We're going to try and get more as the protest continues over the course of this morning. Greg Manns, was he throwing shade on you? He thanked Posobiec, me, and Bannon?
Yeah, I'm going to have to figure out what's going on there.
You're going to have to go get Jack Maxey a knuckle sandwich for lunch today. All right, we're going to take you back to the Chinese embassy as and when we get more information here. It's such an important moment. We've been talking about this for months. People who, and you have to remember this, when you go out there, mask or no mask, they are trying to film you, to capture your face, to threaten you here in the United States, to threaten perhaps their families back in Hong Kong or in mainland China. It is so brave what these people are doing. It is incredibly brave what these people are doing. And by the way, you want to go and stand with them? Stand with them. We'll be providing details in the future on future events, future protests. Sign up for the War Room newsletter at pandemic.warroom.org or at warroom.org and keep up with all the latest from the team who are down there, who are helping out, who are participating, who are reporting from the field. This is action, action, action. And talking about action, one of the things, Greg Manns, you look like you want to jump in here.
Yeah, something that just popped in my head is... is Jack, if we get him back, to get a report if anyone from the mainstream media is down there covering this.
Well, I can tell you that right now they're not, but we will ask Jack Maxey that. In fact, producer Vish, ask Jack Maxey that question live. We'll get an answer for you right now. It's anybody in the establishment media covering the brave anti-CCP protesters. Good call, Greg Manns. Speaking of action, I'm going to go now to another man of action from this week. Gavin Wax is the president of the New York Young Republicans. Gavin, thanks for joining us on War Room Pandemic.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Hey, Gavin, so let's start at the top. Take us through this whole thing, because what you did was something that I've been talking about on this show for a while now. We saw it in the United Kingdom with the Patriots surrounding the Churchill statue, the veterans of the Grenadier Guards surrounding the cenotaph on the streets of London. We've started to see it now here in the United States too, people fighting back. And I'll talk through my experiences of confronting some protesters yesterday in downtown Washington, D.C. But talk to us about where the issue struck for you as the president of the New York Young Republicans, what you did, how you did it. Walk us through that whole thing.
Well, yes, Raheem, you nailed it on the head. I mean, we're seeing today the working classes of both the UK and the United States standing up for their legacy, for their history, for their traditions. We're absolutely sick of this upper middle class bourgeoisie revolution that's engulfing our nation, this Maoist cultural revolution, which is seeking to destroy our statues, deface them, and essentially erase our past. And what we saw this past Sunday, over 200 patriots gathered on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which you all know is obviously a very big conservative hotbed. But they gathered there in the heat. We had a rabbi pass out from the heat, but we were there. We stood tall and proud for our statues, for our history, and for our police, for our flag. And, you know, we called out the feckless leadership of both parties who are completely missing in action as this is all ravaging our nation. And, you know, the people are just absolutely sick of it. This is the real silent majority. These are the people that get up every day to work a job they hate, for a boss they can't stand, to make just enough money to live paycheck to paycheck. And for all their hard work and taxes, what do they get from our political elites? Absolutely nothing. Rising crime, homelessness, and now they have to watch our cities burn. So we stood up, we said enough is enough, and we're not going to be lectured to by some uppity, you know, grad student with a liberal arts degree living off daddy's trust fund.
Well, can we, to the producers at America's Voice, can we play Gavin's speech there? I see the B-roll playing, but actually let's get some audio from what you, Gavin, you said there out in the field this weekend. Let's roll that clip. We'll get more of that from the protest as well. There's more footage, and we want to play what you actually said there, Gavin. I realized, by the way, nobody's blaming any production staff today. We are with Stephen K. Bannon on the boat. We are with Jack Maxey in the field in Washington D.C. So we've got a lot of production balls in the air. Jack Posobiec, you had a question for Gavin.
Yeah, Gavin, I wanted to ask, so, you know, we've seen the targeting of the specific statues around the country, and in New York, they focus right now, at least, on Teddy Roosevelt. They haven't made it to Lady Liberty yet. I'm sure they'll get there. But what was it about Teddy Roosevelt and his really stand as a populist Republican that you think speaks to this moment, why you went there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. Teddy basically founded the New Nationalist movement, almost sort of a precursor in many ways to the Trump movement. He was a populist. He had some progressive underpinnings, of course, but he was a proud American. He loved this country. He fought for this country. He bled for this country. And he's one of the most popular presidents in U.S. history. I mean, this was a man who was ahead of his time in terms of race relations. This is a man who was ahead of his time in many ways, beyond just that. But it just goes to show that they'll continue to move the goalpost in this slippery slope of historical destruction. It doesn't matter if you're a guy like Teddy with a fantastic mustache and, you know, a great Rough Rider uniform. They'll still come after you. He was a conservationist. He was a protectionist. He wanted universal health care. I mean, these are all tenets supposedly of the left, but they'll eat their own. And this is just about erasing the past so they can build their new dystopian future, just like they did in Maoist China, just like they did in all the tyrannical regimes throughout history, from the Jacobins to Nazi Germany. So Teddy Roosevelt is worth defending, and even the New York Times couldn't even hit us hard because everyone knows. I mean, there's a huge population, Democrats, Republican, who still love the guy. So if the New York Times did a neutral piece on us, you could see that there's a massive support for him behind the scenes that's not being shown.
Yeah, Gavin, it's been incredible work. We're going to roll the clip of you from this weekend now. Let's play it.
NYPD, 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 NYPD. Where are our leaders? Where are our leaders? We elect them every year, and they tell us they're going to do everything we promised, and they never, ever deliver. I don't care what party they are, Democrat or Republican. We got plenty of weak, limp-wristed Republicans in office who do nothing. Where are they? Where are they for our statues? Where are they for our flag? Where are they for our police officers? Nowhere. I don't care what letter is next to your name. If you're not defending this country, you don't get my vote. I hope as well they don't get your vote. Thank God. But thank God we do have someone with some balls, some chutzpah in the White House who's going to stand up and protect our people. Protect our history. He's a New Yorker. He's from Queens. He stands for the people. And the other day he passed an executive order that did up to 10 years in prison for anyone caught defacing and destroying American monuments. God bless that. They pillage our cities, they loot our stores, they destroy our communities, they erase our history. Enough is enough. Basta.
Gavin, incredible scenes there, especially as you say in the hotbed of republicanism, the Midtown Manhattan. Gavin, the shirt. We have to have a partners discussion about the fashion choices that you're making there. Gavin, I wanted to bring this up as well. That it's not just putting a protest together that you've been so successful at. But few people outside of maybe the Republicans in New York will know this. But you kind of took over the New York Young Republicans with our producer Vish Burra here from the ground up and rebuilt the organization. And actually, Jack Posobiec and I spoke together at the club on the same night. And I couldn't believe you had a greater show of participants, of force, by the way, of intellectual heavyweights in the audience. Frankly, some of them should have been speaking, let alone us.
That was one of the best nights.
Up there. And there were so many of them. So, well, I mean, how did you do it? Why was it so? Why have you dedicated your life to this the last couple of years?
Well, thank you, and that's absolutely correct. Producer Vish and I basically led a coup d'etat of a very old and storied Republican institution here in New York City, the New York Young Republican Club. It has a legacy going back to the 1860s. You know, they invited Abraham Lincoln to speak at Cooper Union and launched his presidential career. But for many years, it was a bastion of Northeastern Rockefeller liberal establishment Republicans, and they were still continuing in that mold until just before Vish and I took over. And when we did take over, we were told, oh, don't go right, don't become conservative, certainly don't become populist. And if you embrace Trump, your club will die, you'll suffer. And, you know, we bucked that trend and we went full right. You know, we obviously had you, Raheem, we had you, Jack. We've been having some great events. And, you know, we're breaking fire code every other week. We have a speaker. You know, we're getting 400 or 500 people to show up to our events. The membership has soared. We're the largest club in the country now.
Wow.
We're raising tons of money. And it just proves that there's a massive silent majority. There's a demographic that wants to see some people with a backbone, with a spine to speak for the views that everyone holds. That's why Tucker is doing so great. That's why you guys are doing so great. If we just had some people that would look beyond like the rigged polls and their stupid cocktail parties, they would get a ton of success in doing this.
Yeah, I got to say, that's Tucker Carlson's Republican Party out on the streets, and the footage that we just showed, and it's a great credit to him. He's a great inspiration to so many of us. Gavin, we've got about a minute and a half left here. No, I don't want to get personal with any of this, so let's leave names out of this. But you have seen in the surrounding boroughs in New York not quite the same push for working class Republican values. There still are the old establishment creeps lurking around, are there not?
Oh yes, I'm getting sent tweets from these cowards who won't even, you know, have the balls. I don't know if I could say that to at
well,
me.
You just did.
Basically claiming that the 200 plus patriots who showed up were a bunch of losers who could only quote Teddy Roosevelt, and these guys, these consultant hacks, these grifters who prey on Republican candidates who want to, you know, make a difference, who prey on the donors, who prey on the grassroots. They're attacking us, they're mocking us, they're taking cheap shots at us. It's a real shame, but you know their days are coming. They have no popular appeal. They don't go viral. They're not doing the things that you guys are doing, and no one cares about them. So they're living their they're living in their petty little fiefdoms, and we'll continue to prove that what we're doing is the right path forward for the party and the movement.
Gavin, 20 seconds left. Just tell people where they can go to support you and support your club.
Yes, thank you, Raheem. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Parler, etc. at Gavin Wax, GavinWax. For the club, it's at NYYRC, and you can check out the club's website, www.nyyrc.com.
NYYRC. If you want to support people taking action, Gavin Wax and the New York Young Republicans, the largest version in the country right now. We'll be back with more after this short break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020 has been a gut punch to American business, and if you're going to succeed, you need every possible advantage. Smart companies run on NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. Get your free guide right now at netsuite.com/Bannon. We're grateful for all of our supporters and sponsors on this show, and indeed our media partners, America's Voice, Newsmax, G News, GTV, and all of the rest. You can catch us on podcast everywhere: Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, Luminary, whatever your podcast preference app of choice is, and also make sure that you are going to pandemic.warham.org. Greg Manns and the team, they put up the show notes at the end of every show, so you guys get the links to the things that we've been talking about, so you can share them on social media, whatever your social media app of choice is. It's increasingly becoming Parler for a lot of people as Twitter continues to crack down against conservatives, as Facebook continues to bow to woke capital. We'll be keeping a close eye on everything in the big tech sphere, including and not limited to the Indian government's decision yesterday to ban 59 apps that are basically run and designed and service the Chinese Communist Party. I want to see that action here in the United States. I want to see that action all across the Western world. The alliance of liberty, the alliance of free nations coming together to say no to the Chinese Communist Party and how they spy, probably not on you. If the demographic of this show is above the age of, the average demographic is above the age of 30, 35. You probably don't have TikTok installed on your phone yourselves, but I bet your kids do, or I bet your grandkids do, or I bet somebody you know does, maybe somebody at work does. Take a very close look at how the media is treating the latest developments around TikTok and what we're discovering about this CCP-controlled app. In the back of all of this right now is the revelation that they're spying on your clipboard data. That is the things you copy and paste, credit card details, passwords, private messages to friends, whatever it is. They can see it. They have the ability to see it. And people have exposed that on tech blogs just over the last week. But what's the mainstream media running with on TikTok in the last 24 hours, in the last 36 hours? They're doing PR, public relations. TikTok's great because TikTok was used against President Trump. Because AOC says TikTok's cool. You go and look, TikTok is encouraging people to be lesbians on Tinder or whatever it is. Go look, I'm not making that headline up. It's a New York Times headline from yesterday. Go and look at it for yourselves. And then ask the question, why are these news organizations that run China Daily inserts in their papers, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, why are they running interference for TikTok? Oh, that's right. The CCP literally pays for their propaganda to be put in U.S. newspapers. And the U.S. newspapers oblige them. For what? For $400,000? That's what we're selling this country out for? For $400,000 a year to put Chinese Communist Party propaganda inside a U.S. newspaper? Are they really that desperate for money over there at the Grey Lady? It sickens me. It's disgusting. But what's encouraging, and again, this show is about action, and we're not all down in the dumps. We are positive, and you look at the scenes from outside the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. today. I want to make sure we've got some of these images up on the screens in front of you. Again, if you listen to this show on podcast, you're missing great imagery. We've actually become better at this over the last couple. I'm not saying it's anything to do with the fact that we hired producer Vish, but he might like to take credit for it. But the AVN guy is doing a fantastic job and we are bringing you live images now from this protest outside the CCP embassy in Washington, D.C. We've got Jack Maxey down there and the team, the rest of the War Room team. We're in a bare-bones staffing operation here on Capitol Hill right now. There's Jack Maxey on your screens right now. It's so important. And you know how you know it's important? The New York Times won't cover it. CNN doesn't have a live camera down there. That's how you know it's important. That's why we keep CNN in the background. People ask always in the live feed, why is CNN on the background? Know thy enemy. Know thy enemy. Know what they're doing. Know what they're covering. Know how to fight them. And they're not down there. The War Room is. I want to pivot now to something related, but not completely unrelated. Jack Posobiec, you were accosted last week when you went down to do the job of a journalist. Was it last Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday.
And
after
you were
work,
on this
actually.
show. you were on this show in the morning.
In that morning, right?
And I
It was
kind
the
of
last time I was on.
And I kind of had the idea that you were going home after that. In fact, we said our goodbyes. You got in your car, and I thought, okay, there goes Jack. I guess I'll speak to him on Monday.
Right.
And then I kind of weekended off on Friday evening. Took a little bit of time to myself. Didn't really check my phone. And later on in the night / early the next morning, I started getting a lot of people texting me, direct messaging me on Twitter. Hey, did you see what happened to Jack? Hey, I've spoken to Jack. It's like, I talk to Jack like several times a day. What's going on? I don't need to talk to Jack again. And then I started to see the pictures and I really should. I know I should have tweet notifications on for you, like everyone should, at Jack Posobiec. But tell us a little bit about when you went down there. Well, tell us about where it was, why you went down there, what happened,
right.
and by the way, any relationships that you've maintained since.
Well, what was interesting, when we signed off on Friday, then I went over to the, right down the street here to the One American News studio, and we were conducting some filming for actually an Antifa special that we're going to be running, I think this weekend, and I hadn't actually planned to go out. Now, what was happening on Friday night? This statue out in what's called Lincoln Park.
Mm-hmm.
This is a statue of Abraham Lincoln. It was actually the original Lincoln Memorial of Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
Something a lot of people don't know is that this one actually predates the larger one at the other end of town by about 50 years. And a lot of the proceeds that were used to erect this one were actually paid for and donated by freedmen, by ex-slaves that had gone to produce this. And then the dedication of this statue was done by Frederick Douglass himself, a leading abolitionist who had been an advisor to Abraham Lincoln during the war. And so 1876 is when it was first erected, so that's just about a decade after Lincoln's assassination. So his memory is still very fresh, and this is a huge moment in not only Washington, D.C. history, but America's history, right? This was the first national monument to Abraham Lincoln that was erected. And the fact that people who did it had ancestors of theirs, or I should say descendants of theirs, who arrived at this protest on Friday, as well as reenactors. There was a gentleman dressed up as Frederick Douglass with wig on, full period garb, and it was incredible to see that there were people who are from the community saying that they wanted to preserve the history because of its importance to them and because of what their ancestors had done. And then you had younger people there screaming and yelling and chanting that we need to pull this down and this is a colonizer and every other word that they use. And so that interplay is really what kind of drew me into the story. I said, hey, wait a minute, there's actually a much more nuanced story here to this, because this isn't some statue of some far past figure that that people have created a huge reinvention of. This is Abraham Lincoln. It's literally the man who freed the slave, the great emancipator. And so when I heard about that and I found out what was going on, we had a team there from One American News, and the Daily Caller had some people there, Fox News had some people there, and I said, I'll go in, I'll go do a lap. I'll do my live stream, I'll show people what's going on, and I'll leave. I found out about that nuanced discussion that was happening, and you could see the crowd actually wasn't really swayed about tearing it down. You could see the cognitive dissonance on their faces. At one point, actually, if you go back and watch, everybody watches the end of my live stream, but if you watch the beginning of the live stream, they said, put up your hands to the crowd. And there's this girl with like a football helmet on saying, put up your hands. And how many people want to take this statue down? And people are looking at a statue of Abraham Lincoln, and you see only a few hands tepidly go up because they know they're supposed to say yes. But at the same time, the cognitive dissonance of their actual understanding of American history, their understanding of rights, of the Civil War it's clashing. There's that huge clash, and that's when you have a physical and a mental clash. That's what's cognitive dissonance is. And so at that point, a gentleman by the name of Don Folden, who's actually the head of DC Black History Tours, a guy that I've seen around town because he has this sign that he carries everywhere he goes. Yeah. He has this great uniform that he wears, and he looks like the conductor. He calls himself the Truth Conductor, actually. Mm-hmm. And he's the all over Periscope and social media and Instagram. He's very, very good at what he does. And he was up there saying, hold on a second, and he's like, I'm not, a Donald Trump guy or anything like that, but this is part of our history.
Right.
And they silenced him.
How did they silence him? Shouting him down? They
shouted him down. They stood in front of him. They blocked his way. They wouldn't give him access to, they had a bullhorn they were using. They wouldn't let him use that. And he was saying, excuse me, I'm the head of DC Black History Tours.
Right.
This is I'm the expert on this. and they were telling him that he didn't understand, that he wasn't sure what was actually going on. So at that point I said, look, I want to get closer so at least my microphone can pick up what's going on, what's happening. When I got closer, that's when they identified me. They said, hey, wait a minute, aren't you Jack Posobiec of One American News? You're seen as a conservative media outlet. What are you doing here? And I stood my ground, and it was at that point that members of Antifa, the local Antifa, I think you see on the video now.
That's right.
Came up to me and started accosting me. They knew exactly who I was.
And you're just basically by yourself here.
Well, I've actually got, and you can see in the video, that's Kevin Corke of Fox News.
Yep.
And then I didn't actually realize at the time, but that was his security
Yep.
that he brought over to come in and say, look, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of this situation.
We're going to go to a quick break now. When we come back, we've got Burgess Owens, or trying to connect with Burgess Owens in the next block. We'll see if that happens. If not, I want to hear more about this. We're going to walk through this more and talk about the tactics used in this war and pandemic. We'll be right back. Guys, we're back.
War Room Pandemic
this one?
with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Jack, I don't know what type of operation they got going on over there at One American News, but you don't typically talk over the intro music. That's the just a bit of programming advice for you.
Was that intro music? Was that you? Was that you playing that just now?
That was me talking as well. We're back in the war room. Greg Manns, Jack Posobiec, Raheem Kassam. We were trying to connect with Burgess Owens on the back of his victory last night, but we're having some technical difficulties, I think, on their end getting him on. But Greg Manns, just talk to us real quick about what happened last night.
Yep. So Burgess Owens was on our show, and he's running in the 4th Congressional District out in Utah and had a big victory last night. This district is a Republican plus 13.
Wow.
So it's in Ben McAdams is the Democrat incumbent there and part of our Dirty 30 list. So we're bringing that back and glad to see that Burgess is going to be taking him on.
We'll bring you more details, and we'll obviously have Burgess on the show again as soon as we can get him on. In the meantime, we want to go back to the scenes outside the Chinese embassy today. I feel like a conductor today, just back and forth, but it's absolutely fantastic what's going on down there. That's why we keep coming back to it here. It's not just that you have to internalize this thing and recognize the seriousness of what's taking place, how long this has been, in terms of planning, people trying to put this together. Obviously, there's a massive security issue for the people who go down there and protest. But we sent Jack Maxey and the team down there with cameras today. We couldn't bring him more. We brought him in the first hour. In fact, just to explain to you, we test before, Vish is supposed to test before the show, all of these feeds. And the feed was fine. I heard it. Everyone here heard it. Crispy, clean. In fact, I said to producer Dan, did I not, before the show, I said, you're actually coming through cleaner and clearer than any of our guests do who join on Wi-Fi down from their homes or their offices on Skype. And they're down there with, a couple of cell phone cameras on a 4G connection, and they sound completely clear and crisp and clean, and it's an amazing setup. Suddenly, we go live from outside the Chinese embassy, and the feed starts to deteriorate and drop, and we can no longer actually get... Now, call me a conspiracy theorist. Maybe I get my 10-4 hat on. But it just seems kind of convenient that we're fine for 10 minutes before the show, and then the show goes live, and suddenly you can't broadcast live. But
well, they've targeted War Room in the past. So the Chinese media apparatus has specifically targeted War Room podcasts.
Is that all the password requests I keep getting on my
It
reset
could be.
requests
It very well could
on
be.
all of my accounts?
And inside that embassy, they've absolutely got espionage services. They've got MSS in there. They've got intelligence agents, and who knows what kind of technical capabilities that they've got. Certainly, they use that embassy as most embassies do that have these capabilities to spy on other embassies and people going around D.C. So it's certainly not beyond the pale whatsoever to say that they're trying to use that to collect whatever sort of information they can from cell phones and signals that are coming.
I was just really trying to lure the Media Matters intern listening to this into writing up Kassam floats conspiracy theory that CCP is disrupting, and then we'll be able to prove them Media Matters wrong and prove us right time and time again. In the meantime, we've got the guys down there doing quick, short video updates and then sending them right into the show. Here's one we received literally about 60 seconds ago. So let's roll this.
Hey guys, I just wanted to give you a little update. I've spent the last half hour or so talking to a group of women here. And for obvious reasons, they don't necessarily want to be interviewed on camera, but they wanted everybody in the war room, all our viewers, everybody to know that we are inspiring the people in China. And what was sort of frightening, you had a mother and a daughter, lovely people, full of bravery, and they came up to us to thank us. And then they started talking to me about how they love the fact that we are always advocating for the Chinese people, but they said what's so interesting is they get attacked by their own families inside China who tell them they have to join a patriotic organization in America. They have to stop with all this nonsense, that they're so gaslighted that they believe everything that they hear about the CCP inside the country. And these are people who, we're talking about a mother to her daughter or a sister to her sister. This is how insidious the power of the regime is to continue to propagandize the Chinese people. And that's why it's so important that we get the word out. Back to you, Raheem.
We're really appreciative to Jack Maxey and the team down there at the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C., bringing you live updates from a protest that's still growing out there in numbers outside the Chinese Embassy. Some pretty extraordinary scenes. Think about it carefully. The juxtaposition. On the one hand, you have people marching through the streets of Washington, D.C., maybe of your town, your city, your state as well, effectively demanding full communism for the United States. We know that the Black Lives Matter founders have called themselves trained Marxists. We know by looking at the way their funding works through Act Blue, with the politicization of all of this, and we'll get into this in the end of this hour, in the end of this show as well. Finally, you probably heard me, if you're an avid listener of the show, you heard me last week, in the last 2 weeks, bemoaning the fact that British football clubs, soccer teams as you call them, have had Black Lives Matter on the back of their shirts where the player names are supposed to be, Black Lives Matter armbands on the side of their shirts, NHS heart-shaped logos in the middle of their shirts. I mean, the full-on politicization of sporting events in the United Kingdom. And you are now, and by the way, taking the knee in the center circle, you're now starting to see pushback against this. I'll get into that in the next segment as well. People are starting to realize, especially because some of the things that the Black Lives Matter UK crowd have been tweeting, some deeply anti-Semitic stuff over the last couple of days, people are now starting to see through this all over the world. So think about the juxtaposition between those guys calling for communism and these brave people outside the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. fighting communism, fighting to be free from totalitarian communism, whether it's in Hong Kong, whether it's in mainland China, or the fact that they follow you here and harass you here and harass your families in the United States and in Europe too. We'll get into more of that as we get updates from Jack Maxey in the field. Jack Posobiec, you had something to respond to in that clip, and then I want to go back to Lincoln Park.
Yeah, well, what Maxey's talking about there is actually endemic to living inside China. Those families that are there, you got to understand the state of the information operations that are run on them on a regular basis. And this is similar to what we're seeing in the United States in a way, because we hear this idea of smashing our history, destroying our history, erasing our history, changing our history. Well, in China, that's been done on an ongoing basis since the start of the People's Republic in 1949, to the point where when I lived in China, one of the things that I used to do just as a sort of social experiment is I would show people in China in my age group, I was in my 20s when I was there, I would show them that picture of Tank Man from Tiananmen Square. We've all seen that iconic picture of the man standing in Tiananmen Square right before the crackdown, standing up to the tanks. Not one of them understood what it was. Wow. Everybody, they said, what is this? Is this Photoshop? Is this, and everybody outside the country, that's one of the most iconic pictures, actually presaged the downfall of the Soviet Union and international communism. That was one of the sparks that flew around the world. But inside China, the world's most populous country, they don't even know what it is. So when they're going to their family members, you can totally understand that from their perspective, they think the Communist Party is the greatest thing ever, that all they did was modernize China, industrialize China. This is like in Italy when they used to say Mussolini made the trains run on time, right? This is their only perception of what's actually going on. And so when they see people out there marching and protesting, it twists everything around.
Greg, man, do you look like you got something to jump in with?
Yeah, and it just brings me back to our Saturday specials that we do and how many times our guests have talked about the brainwashing that goes on at such an early age.
Yeah, it's incredible. If you missed any of those Saturday specials, they're all available on YouTube. What were they called, Greg? The
Descent into Hell.
Descent into Hell. Extraordinary specials here. Okay, I want to get back to those scenes at Lincoln Park. If we can throw the footage back up again. Jack, when we left off at the end of the last segment, you were talking us through when it started to get ropey for you. Just pick up right there.
Yeah, so at that point, so I'm standing on the steps there leading up to the monument itself, and to let people understand, that whole area is concrete. So these are concrete steps. There's concrete pavement there in the park, sort of the middle of the park, around from where the grass is. And so Antifa then comes up. It starts to get heated. They're screaming every name under the sun at me. They're trying to provoke me. And I didn't give them anything. I didn't give them what they wanted. I stood there. I stood my ground.
You look like a very cool customer right there.
Tactical stoicism, right? And they say fall back on your military training, right? So I remember being in boot camp and having, the instructor screaming everything in your face and trying to get you to move and flinch and to look the other way and just.
Vish has that with Steve every day.
Just kind of stand there. Yeah, that's what Steve's doing. And so I actually was I mentioned this on the Taylor Marshall show, but I was actually sort of reciting the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel in my head, just over and over. Don't give them what they want. Just recite your prayer over and over. At that point, they pushed me down and they tried to knock me down the stairs, and so I regained my footing. But they were actually trying to push me onto the concrete and to knock me down onto there. That probably would have done serious damage if I hadn't regained my balance quick enough. And at that point, Don Folden of DC Black History Tour says, Jack, look, this is escalated. Why don't you just come with me? We'll walk out. And I said, Don, I'd love to, because you're someone, I've seen you around town. We've always been friendly. I just wanted to hear your side of the story about why you want to preserve the statue. In the middle of all that, I'm still thinking about trying to get the story, right?
Right.
I'm there for One American News. I'm trying to do my job. And even as we start to leave the area where the statue is, Antifa then keeps following us and keeps pushing us from behind, pushing me, kicking me. At one point, they went into my pocket. They tried to steal some stuff from there. I got that back. And I said, all right, fine, I'm going to leave the park. I'm going to walk to my car. That's when Fox News Security, and huge shout out to Kevin Cork for doing what he did that day to help us out, even though we're from separate networks. We're all on the ground as people, and we're in the same profession. And despite going at my neck, kicking me in the legs, getting in my face, pushing me down, I wasn't going to respond, because I know that someday I got a 2-year-old son, and he's going to watch all this, and he's going to say, Dad, why didn't you do anything? I'm going to say, son, because sometimes you don't have to solve every problem with your fists. You don't have to solve every problem with violence. And sometimes it's actually stronger to stand your ground and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
This image that you're seeing on screen now, I want to leave that up for a second. This is the iconic image that came out from Getty Images as a result of the altercation. And we've got about a minute left here. Just talk to us about this person, goggles, standing off against you there, and then if you really could, very quickly, about what's being done to capture the people who assaulted you.
Well, in that image, and honestly, the vein sticking out of my neck, I look at it now and I don't even really remember that specific moment, because it was all going on, and your head's on a swivel. So they say, what was I thinking about? Honestly, I was thinking about somebody coming up and cracking me in the back of the skull, because we've seen Antifa use bike locks in the past. Eric Clanton, the bike,
and they come
professor,
up behind you,
right? And they try to get a cheap shot in. And so I actually turned. Stefan Kleinhens from One American News was there with me, and I turned to him and I said, "Look, just get my 6, man. Keep an eye there, and if they come up with anything other than water, just grab me, because that's what I was really worried about." But at the same time, he's screaming in my face, calling me every name under the sun, trying to provoke a reaction from me. And look, I just kind of stood my ground, and I think I actually said to him at one point, I'm not running away.
Well, good for you, Jack Posobiec. I mean, there's a lot of reporters out there who are trying to do the news every day, bring the truth to the American people and the global audiences that they command, and they are repeatedly stopped, harassed, assaulted. Where's Jim Acosta? Where's that brave Jim Acosta? Why wasn't he standing there in Lincoln Park? And where's Brian Stelter's coverage of journalists under attack, physical assault, for doing their jobs in Washington, D.C.? Reliable sources. This is War and Pandemic. Back with more after this break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020's been a gut punch to American business, and if you're going to succeed, you need every possible advantage. NetSuite by Oracle is a sponsor of this show, and it's also the world's #1 cloud business system. Smart companies run on NetSuite because it gives you the visibility and control over your financials, your HR, your e-commerce, your inventory, everything you need all in one place. So whether you're doing million or hundreds of millions in sales, NetSuite lets you manage every penny with precision. You have the agility to compete with anyone, anywhere, right from your phone. So join over 20,000 companies who trust NetSuite to make it happen for them. They surveyed hundreds of business leaders around the country and put together a free playbook of the top strategies they're using as America reopens for business. You can get that free guide, 7 actions businesses need to take now, and a free product tour of NetSuite by Oracle at netsuite.com/Bannon. netsuite.com/Bannon. You're in the war room. We've got the headphones off, letting the hair flow out right now. Jack Posobiec, Greg Manns, Raheem Kassam. And Jack just walked us through exactly what happened to him last week outside the Lincoln statue in Lincoln Park, Washington, D.C. We've brought you live coverage of the Chinese embassy protests that are taking place right now on the opposite side of Washington, D.C. And somewhere in the middle, there is Black Lives Matter Plaza, where protesters have been camped out for weeks now with the help of the mayor of the city painting the streets. We're going to have more on that as I think it's Judicial Watch challenging some of that, what's going on there. We're going to have more on that as the days progress. But those people effectively calling for full communism. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what happened to me last night as I was enjoying a late afternoon, late lunch meeting with some friends and colleagues, Harlan Hill and others, sitting outside in downtown Washington, D.C. Now, there are a scattering of restaurants in the area, and we suddenly saw a bunch of police cars arrive on the scene ahead of what we imagined was a protest coming through. It's become a pretty normal scene here now. The protesters stopped as people were eating early dinners outside a restaurant. I'm not going to get into names. And were just overtly harassing people who were sitting outside there trying to enjoy, one of the first meals, if not the first meal they've had out in months. I walked over to the scene. There was probably about, it could have been anywhere between 50 and 75 as a ballpark of these protesters. I walked over there just wanting to observe, hat tucked low, not want to draw any attention to myself. And as we stood there and watched the scenes take place as these people were harassing, Harlan and I, we started to just ask questions. And they got pretty defensive and aggressively defensive as we asked questions. Why are you doing this to people who are just trying to enjoy a meal? The restaurant owner is a known progressive in this city. Why are you doing it there? Why aren't you doing it somewhere else? Why aren't you protesting outside the Chinese embassy? Given the CCP's targeted harassment and enslavement of ethnic minorities, including blacks in Africa and the Uyghurs in the region. And, I won't say that the tensions didn't rise on both sides, but for me, myself, I made sure not to raise my voice or become aggressive to anybody. I was asking questions. And interestingly enough to me, it was the black people, the African Americans in the crowd, who came up to me and said, hey, listen, man, we totally agree with your right to free speech. We totally agree with your right to question us. We totally understand that. And it started to explain to me what they were protesting about why and why they were deploying the tactics they were deploying. But it was the white liberal women who interceded and started to shout in my face and who started to tell them not to talk to me. And that's when things got a little bit out of control in terms of, both sides shouting back and forth. Again, I didn't raise any voices, but shouting back and forth between people who were with us and people with them, and the police intervened and said, look, guys, they're going to do their thing. Let them do their thing. Can you just walk the other way? And I actually said to them, look, I said to the police officers, look, I really appreciate everything you guys do. And they were appreciative of me saying that. And I said, but, you are prioritizing their speech and their rights over ours here. And also, we are sitting over there where they are. We're not going to walk the other way. We had 2 dogs there. We had our bags there. We had all of our equipment there. We had been seating there, having lunch, having, a business meeting, effectively, outside that spot. And they were telling us, you guys go the other way. What, leave all our stuff and walk the other way? And we said, no, look, I'm afraid we're not going to do that. We are going to wait until we're going to stand right here where we were standing. We're going to wait until the protesters leave and take our seats again exactly where we were sitting. But it wasn't a scary altercation, but what...
Didn't you say they called you something?
Oh, they call me white. Well, they started chanting at Haaland that he was a racist or something. And as you mentioned when we were talking about what happened to you, all this stuff goes on really quickly.
Right.
And you're not really, necessarily even strategically thinking. You're just kind of trying to stay with your wits about you in and of yourself, in case somebody comes up and smacks you from behind or anything like that. And at one point I noticed Haaland was being called a racist, and Haaland puts his arm around me and says, I'm a racist. And the woman goes, yeah, that's a white guy. To which I took my hat off. I'm not a white guy. And by the way, what would it even mean if he was standing there with a white guy? Does that mean he's necessarily a racist? It was bizarre to me.
It's like that old quote, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you.
Right, and it struck me based on what you had said about your experiences. Now, I'm not going to say that at any point last night I felt particularly threatened. I didn't feel like they were going to throw me to the concrete or anything like that. As I say, a lot of them were really genuinely peaceful and genuinely wanted a discussion and didn't want an altercation and were quite happy to deal with the back and forth of it. Really seem to understand that that's what the country's about.
Because you see this a lot with, and I've seen this with particularly the white protesters that are in this thing. They're not there for other people. They're actually there for themselves.
Right. And communism. For themselves and for communism.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go, guys. But it's been an action-packed show. Make sure you check out the first episode, especially from today. If you missed it, go back, check it out. I know a lot of you catch up on the other coasts and indeed abroad. Episode 259. You've got to see those scenes from outside the Chinese embassy. We're going to be back with more War Room Pandemic with the whole team. I want to thank Jack Posobiec at Jack Posobiec on all of the social media platforms. We'll see you tomorrow.